Early hours, we could see some clear spells through this central swathe of the UK, and here temperatures dipping into low single figures and some further showers running across southern coastal counties of England too. There's a mixed picture for Tuesday, some bright sunny spells across this central part of the UK, Wales into the Midlands, for example. This frontal system across eastern parts of Scotland continues to give outbreaks of rain through the day. Into the afternoon, we'll see some showers bubble up for many areas, but there'll be plenty of sunny spells, some rain in the southwest later. Temperatures in the sunshine reaching around 15 or 16 Celsius, still cold under the cloud and rain for Scotland. Into Wednesday, the next area of low pressure moves in, pushing rain north and eastwards across the country. Some of this could be heavy at times. Behind it, some showers following in, but also some brighter skies. And towards the end of the week, it turns wetter and windier. But with winds from the south, temperatures start to rise.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, hello, my name is Johnny Ratner. Long queues continue through Greater Manchester on the clockwise carriageway of the M60. The motorway remains closed to junction 23. As of course the Ashton Underline exit, a serious collision continues to be investigated, where police alongside the air ambulance both remain on scene. In Norfolk, meanwhile, southwest of Kings Lynn, the A47 is closed westbound between the Tilney All Saints and Terrington St John exits following a serious collision. The clockwise M25 on the western stretch is blocked just north of the M40 following an accident queuing halfway back to the M4. And in Essex, the A176, the Langton Road at Billericay, that's been blocked since this morning following a building fire. There are no long-distance trains to and from London Euston, though Avanti and London North Western are running north of Milton Keynes to a reduced service. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel. Good evening. New hate crime laws come into place in Scotland today, but could they be a danger? Could innocent people perhaps not get jobs as a result of it? There's a huge row as a police officer in the Met tells a Jewish woman that a swastika has to be taken in context, really. And migrant crossings so far this year are up by 43%. Where is the Home Secretary, James Cleverly? He was boasting so much at Christmas that the numbers were down. But before all of that, let's get the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nigel, thank you very much. The top stories this evening. Campaigners in Edinburgh have delivered a coffin outside the Scottish Parliament, symbolising what they say is the death of free speech. It's after the introduction of a new hate crime law, which makes it a crime to stir up hatred against people with protected characteristics. That includes disability, age, sexual orientation, or people who are transgender. Gender-critical author J.K. Rowling said it risks outlawing genuine debate over biological sex, while some police forces have raised concerns that complaints could be lodged for political reasons. The Scottish Conservatives say resources should be directed towards frontline policing. More than 5,400 migrants have been intercepted crossing the English Channel in small boats during the first 3 months of this year. It's a record figure for that quarter, up 43% compared to the same time in 2023. Official figures from the Home Office show 442 people made the crossing in 9 small boats yesterday. That's despite difficult weather conditions, with lifeboats scrambling to assist some of the arrivals. Today's strong winds have now made the journey completely impassable. Plans to fine rough sleepers are provoking outrage, with more than 40 Conservative MPs said to be preparing to rebel. The new criminal justice bill would allow police to fine or move on so-called nuisance rough sleepers. It was intended to replace the Vagrancy Act from 1824, which currently criminalises both rough sleeping and begging. But reports suggest the new bill has been paused while ministers negotiate with MPs who are concerned about the consequences of issuing fines to homeless people. The plans were introduced by the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who branded rough sleeping a lifestyle choice. The head of the Nurses' Union has accused the government of packing hospital corridors with patients and says the quality of care is not only undignified but fatally unsafe. It comes as new estimates suggest more than 250 patients a week in England may have died needlessly last year because of long waits for a hospital bed. A report by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine revealed more than 1.5 million patients waited in emergency departments for longer than 12 hours last year. The Department for Health says it added thousands of hospital beds and insists it's making progress on waiting times. And energy bills are due to fall to their lowest rate in 2 years after regulator Ofgem cut its price cap by 12.3%. It means the average household bill for gas and electricity will fall by around £238 over the course of a year, or about £20 a month. However, around 10 million households are still being urged to submit meter readings to avoid overpayment. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Nigel.
Good evening. It's called devolution, and what it means, of course, is that administrations, be they in Scotland or Wales or local mayors, will take whatever national government does and take it even further. And in this context, today saw coming into law the Hate Crime and Public Order Act Scotland 2021. Now, we've had hate crime legislation, in a sense, since 1986. What's the object of it been? Well, to stop incitement, to stop language that might encourage behaviour that would genuinely be dangerous. That's always been the bar. My worry with this legislation is it contains words like likely. You know, is what you've said likely to perhaps cause somebody to be seriously hurt, whether that's physically or emotionally? And we've even lowered the bar so much that terms that are insulting could be drawn within this legislation. By the way, the maximum penalty, if you break this law, is an unbelievable 7 years in prison. I'm not quite sure what this means for J.K. Rowling, who says quite clearly that trans women are not real women. Will she be one of the first victims of this? I simply don't know. Whilst we do want to live in a society that is civil to each other, and whilst I think we all understand that incitement is genuinely dangerous and wrong at every level, here's my real worry about this legislation. Let's say 2 people have a bust-up, a fallout. It could be in business, it could be within a family. It could be an argument in a pub. And somebody can go and make a complaint to say that you've said something absolutely outrageous, deeply unpleasant, without any evidence whatsoever. That goes on to a police file. The police look at it and say there is a lack of evidence, and yet that will be recorded on your police file as a non-crime hate incident. And even though you've done nothing wrong whatsoever, you're just the victim of a vexatious attack, that is going to be on your file forever. And that, to me, is a very dangerous, slippery slope. Love your thoughts. Do you agree with me? Am I getting perhaps too paranoid about it? Tell me I'm wrong. Is this dangerous? Farage at gbnews.com. Well, I'm joined in the studio by Fadi Farhat, Senior Legal Consultant at Gulbenkian Andonian Solicitors, and veteran LGBT campaigner Peter Tatchell. Fadi, let's begin with you. This does lower the bar, doesn't it? You know, in the past, with the hate legislation, the Race Relations Act, etc., Public Order Act that we've had, this legislation has been there for 40 years. You kind of had to say something that clearly and unequivocally was expressing hatred against the group and perhaps even incitement. This has lowered the bar considerably.
That's correct. So in the past we've had, there has always been a criminal offence of stirring up hatred or by reference to race. That's always been in the Public Law Act of 1986. This goes further by expanding or by including all the protected characteristics. So now we have age, disability, transgender identity, and other the various protected characteristics. So that it goes further in that sense, but it also eliminates the current structure whereby you have to have an intention to do so. So an intention is not the only thing that can amount to a criminal offence. It's whether it's likely what's been said or done is likely.
Which is a very subjective judgment.
Yes, so that's raised concerns that you're criminalising not just what you believe, but you could be criminalised for what you're perceived to believe, which are two different things entirely.
They are. So what happens if there's a 17-year-old and he or she have fallen out with their parents? A fairly common occurrence in most families. Can they report their parents?
In theory, yes. The only distinguishing feature there is, I suspect, that because it was in a private setting, there may be no public interest to prosecute, but that just goes to the prosecutorial decision of whether to prosecute or not necessarily whether an offence has been committed or not.
Puts a huge amount of power, doesn't it, in the hands of judges and the courts?
Yes. And
do you think most of these cases would go to jury trial or not?
No. Well, they can go either way. So depending on what's been said, depending on the seriousness or whether there's any aggravating features, you can go to a jury, yes. There is, though, the Scottish Government does stress that there is an inbuilt defence. So there is an inbuilt defence by reference to freedom of expression. And whether what's been said or done is reasonable in the circumstances by reference to freedom of expression, which does include one's right to shock and offend. But of course, the line is blurred, and much of what's been said is, if we take transgender issues, the concern which J.K. Rowling has is, of course, much of these issues are subject to ongoing public debate or ongoing public discourse. So they're not necessarily settled, such as, for example, Holocaust denial, where we have the evidence of history and the full weight of history to know that that happened. Other areas are not quite settled in the public discourse, such as, for example, sport and the role of transgender competitors in sport.
Which is
not the exclusion of transgender, but the role of transgender. Yes,
Peter Tatchell, I mean, should J.K. Rowling be allowed to say that trans women are not real women?
Well, first let me say, I broadly support this legislation. It has a good aim to protect people against hate. I have a number of caveats, though. First of all, it does extend the race hate laws to other protected characteristics, but not to travellers or women who are both victims of a lot of hate. And that's a big failing. Now, I know the Scottish Government is planning to bring in a misogyny bill to cover women, but why should they be covered in separate legislation? They should be covered in the same legislation. Separating women out that's not equality, that's segregation. The other issue is, of course, many of the terms in this bill or this act are open to subjective interpretation.
as we just said.
So what is a reasonable person? A reasonable person may have a different interpretation. There are terms like malice, ill will, prejudice, hate. None of them are defined. So the question is, how will they be interpreted? Now, there are freedom of expression protections, so it does say very explicitly in the Act that it will not preclude or not cause an offence if you merely criticise or discuss an issue. So, for example, saying that trans women...
But if you insult...
Well, this is...
So does J.K. Rowling insult trans women, in your opinion?
Well, I don't think that falls within the realm under this legislation of insult, because it's got the protection that it's a valid discussion and a criticism.
All right. Well,
now, other people may disagree, but that is what the legislation says. It gives that... also gives very strong protections to religion. So it says it's OK to dispute, disagree, criticise, ridicule, and even insult religion. So there's protections for comedians, films, stage plays that may satirise religion.
Well, that's something. Here's my worry. My worry is, I mentioned it earlier, the vexatious complaint that gets registered as an NCHI, a non-crime hate incident. Here's the horrifying bit. You or I go for a job, and our employer wants the enhanced police check, quite rightly. And on that enhanced police check, it will show up that you were reported, an allegation was made. I mean, this could damage people's lives, innocent people's lives.
Well, it's going to be made worse because under this Act, reporting can be done by third-party centres, which means you don't have to be a victim yourself, but someone, Joe Blogs or whoever, Jane Blogs, can report it. But also it can be reported anonymously via Crime Stoppers. Now, these two aspects open the floodgates to vexatious, malicious complainants and could absolutely flood the police with unjust, unfounded allegations, which could tie up police resources, and as you say, when it goes on to a non-hate...
and damage people's lives. Now, let's just show a clip of the Scottish First Minister, Humza Yousaf, speaking just over a year ago in the Scottish Parliament. I'm very keen to get both of you to comment on this. Here he is.
Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white.
He doesn't seem to like white people very much, does he?
He has, on the basis of that clip, there's an issue.
I don't know. But here's the point about something that is so subjective. I mean, some people, Peter, could interpret that as being really quite aggressive about white people holding positions of rank and power.
Well, of course, I'm sure he wasn't saying that, but with all these things, it has to be looked at in terms of context and intention. So under the legislation, there isn't a clause about intention. It's either a person intends or is likely to behave in ways that are threatening, abusive or insulting. Interestingly, some years ago, the Westminster Parliament removed the insulting clause from the Public Order Act on the grounds it was too sweeping and too wide. And now the insulting clause has been put back in.
Because it's student politics. That's what it's all about. Now, there has been a demo outside the Scottish Parliament today, and I'm joined down the line from Edinburgh by Alan Miller, co-founder of the Together Declaration. Alan, how big was the protest, and what sort of people were there?
Well, it was brilliant, Nigel. It was really big. And lots of people from all over, really. There were unionists, there were Republicans, secular people, there were pastors speaking, people that were non-affiliated politically. There were lots of campaigners from Free Speech Union, Academics for Academic Freedom, from STEW, the Scottish Union of Education, who are very concerned about reporting stations that already exist at universities and other places, over 400 of them, where you can report college teachers and staff and children when they say things. This is an egregious draconian act. It is utterly contemptible. In the land that gave us the Scottish Enlightenment, that James Madison enshrined in the Constitution with free speech, we're now seeing it suffocated. It's an attack on the Scottish people, no matter what political affiliation you're from, because we've got to remember, Nigel, that you and I might disagree about things, but we never get to get clarity in a democracy unless we can thrash these things out. And when they say you're stirring hate, does that mean that someone subjectively just thinks what you're saying is reprehensible? Well, Voltaire reminded us, didn't he? He said, we should be able to, and he would die for the right to be offended by someone else. That's what we need to have in Scotland, and that's why Together are here supporting the challenge against it. We're encouraging all our signatories and all your viewers, Nigel. The elections are coming up. This is a scandal and outrageous.
OK, well, we're not going to get involved with elections because that would be quite difficult, given where we are in the timetable. But no, Alan, really interesting. And I tell you what, introducing a touch of Voltaire to proceedings this evening, I thoroughly approve of. Thank you. I mean, Fardy, this is going to be an absolute legal minefield, isn't it?
It is, and even if you take the clip that you showed there, that, of course, was part of a wider debate. So looking at the wider debate, you can have the context. But if you just take that clip on its own, that could be said to be likely to be perceived as inciting or stirring up hatred on its own. The question is, with social media, with clips being taken into smaller shorts and everything and material being shared, that could create the real risk that what you've actually said isn't embodied fully in the short clip, and that could give rise to a risk of prosecution.
Peter Tatchell, final thoughts with you. Does any of this legislation actually improve society and make things better? I get the intention, you know, and you stated that very clearly at the beginning. Does any of it actually work?
Well, I think we can look at the experience of the legislation against stirring race hate. It hasn't stopped it, but it has dramatically reduced it. It's made black and Asian communities feel safer, and when they are victimised, it's given them redress. So on that count, it's good, and I think that's the purpose and intention of this legislation, to extend that to other groups, so Jewish communities, Muslim communities and others who are often victims of hate, to give them protection, and rightly so. The question is, how is it going to be interpreted? That's the big fear.
No, absolutely.
Good intentions, but let's just look at how it's going to be interpreted. And I just fear that, particularly I feel sorry for the police. They're going to be swamped with vexatious, malicious complainants, deliberately trying to overload.
So it's bad law?
Yeah, it is bad law in the sense that it's got too many open-ended loopholes.
Is it bad law, Fardy?
Whenever you have something that's so broad and subject to evaluative judgment by individuals, you're going to get different opinions from one prosecutor to another, from one CPS caseworker to another, and you're going to have inconsistency. When you have inconsistency, that is bad law.
Right, well, we have some agreement on the panel. Now, on behalf of the Scottish Government, the Minister for Victims and Community Safety, Siobhan Brown, has said nobody in our society should live in fear, and we are committed to building safer communities that live free from hatred and prejudice. We know that the impact on those on the receiving end of physical, verbal or online attacks can be traumatic and life-changing. This legislation is an essential element of our wider approach to tackling that harm. Well, none of us doubt that. It's just that we have agreement here that it's bad law. In fact, I think it's very, very, very bad law indeed. And I think a lot of innocent people are going to finish up as victims of this, and it may well cost a lot of people jobs. Now, in a moment, we'll look at the protest that took place on Saturday, another pro-Palestinian march, and an extraordinary exchange between a Jewish woman and a police officer about interpretations of the swastika. Quite extraordinary.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
I like to call this one robbing Peter to pay Paul. The Labour Party have embarked on a journey that I can only describe as politics of envy. I think it's time we scrutinise their policies more closely and establish in our mind what a Labour government might mean to the education system. Sir Keir Starmer and his party have for far too long capitalised on the abject failure of the Conservatives and haven't really had to explain themselves. But as part of their manifesto, Labour intend to charge VAT at 20% on private schools because I suspect they think that people who send their kids there will stump up the cash no matter what, and that these people have money. They will then use this money, Labour, to fund state schools. Basically, they will rob Peter to pay Paul. But what I believe they've failed to realise, I'm not sure whether they've factored this in, is that many people who send their kids to private schools do so at great sacrifice and are in fact paying twice into the education system. I spent my first year of secondary education in a state school. I'll be honest, when I started I was at the top of the class, but by the end of the year I was near the bottom. But then my dad got promoted to a post on Wall Street in the States. My parents sent me to a private boarding school in the UK run by nuns, and my family moved to America. Thank God for the opportunity I was given to go private. At boarding school, I grew in confidence, and I'm here now because of it. My father's work, NatWest, and a loan my dad took out paid for my private education. We were nowhere near as rich as some of the kids there, but there are also many children, I would say at least half, whose parents were busting a gut to send them there. It is clear that the state education system is failing, but rather than robbing Peter to pay Paul, surely it would be better for the party to improve the state system without destroying the private sector.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, your reactions to that absolutely fascinating debate about what we all thought on the panel was bad legislation being brought in by student politician and First Minister Humza Yousaf. Gareth says, on Sunday, 50,000 football supporters will be watching Rangers v Celtic. They will all commit hate crimes. Gareth, I think you're probably right. Karen says, the new law in Scotland has forgotten women. As a Scottish woman, I feel vulnerable, not protected, and unsafe in public places. The UK is no longer a safe place for women. Karen, I agree with the sentiment of that, but how a piece of legislation passed by the Scottish Parliament to, in theory, protect women would make an ape of the difference, I have absolutely no idea at all. Steve says, this law has one simple objective: to shut down criticism of the SNP. That may be taking it a bit too far. And John finally says, will the new hate crime laws include anti-Englishness? Well, I wouldn't have thought so for one moment, given the way the SNP, or at least many of them, feel. Now, on Saturday, another big march in London, another couple of 100,000 people, or whatever it was, on the pro-Palestinian march again, and one very extraordinary incident that took place between a Jewish woman who was there seeing what was going on and a member of the Metropolitan Police. Listen in to this.
You like to walk with me because I can point these people out to you. And again, I was told when I asked that a swastika was not necessarily anti-Semitic or disruptive to public worship. That doesn't seem right to me.
Everything needs to be taken within context, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's a context of that. Why does the swastika need context?
What exactly are you confused about?
What I'm confused is how you don't. In what context a swastika is not anti-Semitic? This is what I want to know. Because again,
I suppose to some, I don't know how everybody would feel about that song. That has happened. I'm here working to the Bronze Commander, and it is not my responsibility, unfortunately, my role, to walk down the road.
Oh dear, 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 dear. The calibre of plod appears to have gone down somewhat. This chap clearly utterly clueless. How the hell can you talk about a swastika being used? I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but it's so ridiculous I have to. About a swastika being used in context. Now, it could be that that police officer is a highly educated man and a student of ancient Hindu tradition, but somehow I rather doubt that, because the swastika was, and still actually is, in use in India. It's an ancient Hindu symbol, and actually one that stands for peace. It was adopted by the National Socialists and their leader Adolf Hitler, and I think we all know what that symbol means. And if that symbol, is being paraded through the streets of London, then I think we all understand what it means. Now look, I'm not going to contradict myself from the previous segment You know, I don't believe in hate laws, but there are some things on these marches that are utterly provocative in every way. And when you join the dots and put all the different things together, they are pretty unacceptable in modern Britain. Well, I'm joined once again in the studio by Jonathan Sacerdoti, broadcaster and journalist. Jonathan, I was laughing there at the police officer. I mean, it's not funny, really, is it?
Well, I think the ignorance is laughable, but it's certainly also very scary. And I think that what we're looking at there is a police officer who said he doesn't know how everybody would feel about that placard. Well, I think I know how everybody would feel about that placard, unless perhaps they are a Nazi sympathiser, and the police shouldn't be particularly defending them to intimidate Jewish people on the streets. And the broader problem, I think, that arises from this incident is that there are people marching through the streets of London with swastikas. And in fact, the particular image that Jocelyn Weiss was talking about there, I interviewed her yesterday in a long interview. She told me that the particular image was Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, with a Hitler moustache and a swastika on his tie. So I think the context that she alerted that policeman to is blindingly obvious and is anti-Semitic. And those marches have had the effect of intimidating many Jewish and non-Jewish people from going into the centre of London when they're taking place. And that's not a protest. That's a bullying, intimidation practice, and it needs to end. I think the government and the police have talked about this in circles for long enough. I think it's about time they actually acted.
Come on. Haven't the police, Jonathan, just surrendered the streets, effectively? They've given up, haven't they?
Well, the police said they arrested somebody with that very poster to her, but the point is, she said there were many of those posters. In fact, she asked the guy who she met carrying the placard where he got it, and he said they'd been handing them out at a previous protest. So some organised people had printed out these swastika posters.
Because the Met have come back and said an arrest was made. The problem here is, isn't it, that those who go on those marches will say, no. We're not anti-Semitic, we're anti-Israel. And it's how you draw the distinction there.
I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it? When someone's anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, there's plenty of ways to criticise any country. There's plenty of ways to criticise any geopolitical situation. But when you have sort of frothing people on the streets accusing the Prime Minister of the Jewish state of being Adolf Hitler and a Nazi, it's blindingly obvious what you're doing. And I'll go further and say that the right to protest is a very important one in this country for everybody, just as the right to boycott goods personally if you don't like them is. But to intimidate other people not to buy goods that they want to, or not to go out on the streets of London, is not a right any of us have.
Or to storm into banks, building societies, retail shops, because that's the kind of thing that has been going on, and there seems to be almost no deterrent at all.
It certainly seems that way because hundreds of thousands of people are going onto the street. And I think the problem with the policing is that it looks very bad around the world. And I think people are seeing this around the world. People look to London for what's going on. The police seem to consider it successful policing when they have one of these marches and they avoid any kind of violence or protest or altercation taking place during the protest. I wouldn't say that is successful policing because the reason there's no violence or altercation is because Jewish people and right-thinking people have stayed at home to keep out of the way of the mob. That's actually submission. That's not policing. When there was a counter-protest organised by people who'd had enough of this every week, they tucked them down a side street and put layers of police and barriers between the two crowds. That is their approach to stop people getting into any kind of fight. But again, I think that just shows that they've given up. They need to really just toughen up on this and make sure that people feel safe going about their everyday lives.
But Netanyahu, I mean, horrible images. Netanyahu himself, protests now in Israel against his leadership. And just this feeling, Jonathan, that I've got, that we've seen David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, shift the British government position on Gaza significantly. We've seen what's been happening at the United Nations. Israel's running out of friends, isn't it?
For now, I think Israel's still managing to execute the war that it needs to in order to eliminate Hamas's presence in Gaza and eliminate the threat that's been put to them, which is that they would carry out 7th of October style attacks again and again. So it's understandable that they are persistent in that. And I think that actually Israel's allies, including the US and the UK, still maintain a level of support for that. But what they're increasingly worried about, as I can see it, is that there should be humanitarian aid let into Gaza for the civilians there who are used by Hamas in order to manipulate world opinion and put that pressure on Israel to stop its war. So I think that discussion goes on, but allies of Israel are willing to have that discussion, both behind the scenes and in public. And so far, I think Israel has been managing to keep them on side enough that it's still undertaking the war.
I think that support has become, both from the UK and the US, has become a bit lukewarm.
Well, certainly the US, I would say, in that vote at the UN Security Council, did betray Israel somewhat. It's always used its veto to try and stop things that will hinder Israel's ability to protect itself and its people. And I think it did do that. So that is a line in the sand historically as well. But at the same time, the US did very quickly say it's non-binding. We just want you to get more aid in there. I think there's an ongoing discussion, and that tension and debate between the two sides is probably healthy in order to keep the balance between achieving the military goals and also trying to do the best they can to look after the civilians in a very challenging landscape.
Very well. This problem is not going to go away very quickly. Jonathan, thank you very much indeed for joining us again. And yeah, you know, I repeat my thoughts. Not just tough times for Jewish people living in cities like London, but I do genuinely believe that Israel is running out of friends internationally. Tough times. In a moment, let's talk channel migrants. Let's talk about the numbers so far this year, and let's talk about where the Home Secretary is during all of this. And isn't it fascinating that after last week, I published some figures I got from Denmark about those in Denmark committing crime by nationality. There are now calls for the UK government to do the same.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. Over the next 24 hours or so, we'll see the heavy showers fade away. It'll often remain quite cloudy, but there will be some brighter spells into Tuesday. Low pressure dominating the weather pattern at the moment, but a slack area of low pressure, so we've had some slow-moving heavy showers. These slowly fading away through this evening time. We do have a frontal system as well across parts of Scotland, the far north of England, giving some spells of rain. Into the early hours, we could see some clear spells through this central swathe of the UK, and here temperatures dipping into low single figures, and some further showers running across southern coastal counties of England too. There's a mixed picture for Tuesday. Some bright sunny spells across this central part of the UK, Wales into the Midlands, for example. This frontal system across eastern parts of Scotland continues to give outbreaks of rain through the day. Into the afternoon, we'll see some showers bubble up for many areas, but there'll be plenty of sunny spells, some rain in the southwest later. Temperatures in the sunshine reaching around 15 or 16 Celsius, still cold under the cloud and rain for Scotland. Into Wednesday, the next area of low pressure moves in, pushing rain north and eastwards across the country. Some of this could be heavy at times. Behind it, some showers following in, but also some brighter skies. And towards the end of the week, it turns wetter and windier, but with winds from the south, temperatures start to rise.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs Live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Our Home Secretary, James Cleverly, is a great tweeter. Oh, gosh, isn't he? And towards the end of last year, he kept putting out messages on Twitter, or X, as it's now called, saying, we're doing so well. The numbers crossing the English Channel are down by 30%. And over Christmas, oh, goodness me, over Christmas, nobody has come over the Christmas period for the first time since 2018. And I did actually respond to that with a fairly intemperate tweet of my own, if I say so myself, because the wind was blowing between 40 and 50 miles an hour every day. But let's have a look at what he's up to today. Here is the account of James Cleverly this morning, and yes, he's going to do 100 push-ups every day for the month of April, and he's doing it for cancer charities. Now, I thoroughly applaud all of that. However, what we want to know from you, Mr. Cleverly, is why are the numbers that have crossed the English Channel so far this year up by 43%? Yes, that's right, up by 43% year on year, and you haven't said a dicky bird. Rather than push-ups, David Davis MP suggested you should be focusing on push-backs in the Channel, and I would say you should simply be doing your job. I'm joined by Alp Mehmet, Chairman of Migration Watch. Alp, it's way too early to project what this may mean for the next 6 months or for the rest of the year. What it does show is it's all about the weather, really, isn't it?
Partly, of course, the weather's bound to have something to do with it, but all the weather does is delay, frankly. It doesn't actually stop people coming. We've had this conversation at about this time of year for the last 2 years, at least. And each time we've looked ahead. If it continues at the present rate, I can see 50 to 60,000 coming in that we know about. Add to that those that we don't know about, and we're talking serious numbers. That's what's going to happen this year. And the reason they're doing it, weather has something to do with it, that they come out in the sort of flows that they do, but more importantly, they know, and the traffickers know, that when they get here, that's it. They're here to stay. They will keep coming. They will keep coming in ever greater numbers so long as the traffickers find the means to get them here.
Yeah, and the French police, I mean, I've seen pictures today of French police armed now, French police, because they're so conscious that many of the migrant gangs themselves are now armed. We saw a stabbing that took place just a couple of weeks ago. Some pretty dangerous and violent scenes taking place over there. But I've made this point to the viewers and listeners from the start. However hard the French try, it is virtually impossible to police 100 miles of beaches.
Absolutely, absolutely. And until the EU at its external border starts getting serious about who comes in and how many get in, I'm afraid the numbers are simply going to go up and up and up in the EU. And as that happens...
Through the Mediterranean.
Through the Mediterranean. Not just the Mediterranean, overland as well from Turkey. All that will happen is that more and more will end up in the northwest coast of France.
Yeah. Now, the other interesting debate over the weekend, there were some tables put out by the Danish government last week that showed, since 2010, on violent crime, crimes by nationality. And unbelievably, Danish-born was 43rd in the category of those that had committed crime by nationality. Robert Jenrick, having seen this, has decided to follow to demand that the British government does actually tell us the extent of migrant crime, the extent of particularly asylum seekers crime. We've tried as a programme, as a channel, to talk to the government, to talk to the Home Office, to ask for these figures. And we're being told that under FOIs, it's too expensive to process that data.
Nigel, I used to be the Foreign Office's parliamentary clerk. It's a wheeze. It's a ruse, frankly. Of course they can do it. They've got the information. They've got the data. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't know. And guess what? Some 30 years ago, the Tory government then, I think it was 30 years ago, they actually published the number of traffic offences by diplomats.
Really?
So it's nothing new, it's nothing impossible. The data are collected, and as they're collected, they could just as easily put them into...
Because we deserve to know the truth. We deserve to know the truth. There is no doubt in my mind that the increase in a variety of types of crime in London, and I can't speak so much for the other cities around the country, it is obvious to me that these are foreign gangs coming in, masterminding much of this crime.
Yeah, of course, because they can.
Richard Pickings.
It's easy money, exactly.
Yeah.
People come in here, they've been rejected elsewhere, they've tried and failed to get in France, in Germany. They will come here because they know they come here, they can stay, and even if they commit crimes, the fact is that they're never going to be removed. As often as not, we end up looking after them, housing them.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with all those that are going to come in this year? 50, 60,000. They are going to be housed, clothed, kept warm, given pocket money.
It should be a big... iPhones, new iPhones. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
Dental care, don't forget that. We could go on.
We could go
This is a big open goal for the Labour Party, isn't it? The government really in trouble with many of its own voters on this issue. Labour pretty quiet on this.
Well, that's my worry, actually, because if the polls are to be believed, the next government is going to be a Labour government. And frankly, with regard to legal and illegal, and we mustn't forget legal migration, which is massive.
Enormous, yeah.
The Labour Party, with regard to illegals, all it's going to mean is that we're going to have more coming here rather than fewer people coming in. And I'm afraid we're also going to have huge increases in the number of people coming here legally, not forgetting that in 2022 it was 745,000.
Yeah, I know. Out, Mehmet, as ever, thank you. Now, one of the great things about debating this is I always get the Home Office statement. It's always so wonderful. Here goes. Home Office spokesperson has said today, we remain committed to building on the successes that saw arrivals drop by more than a third last year, including tougher legislation and agreement with international partners in order to save lives and stop the boats. So there you are. Now, more Scottish lunacy. Yes, what the Farage moment is, if you've ever been to Edinburgh, then every day of the week, apart, of course, from, Christmas days and Sundays and things like that, the gun fires from the castle at 1 o'clock and it booms across the city and is heard right out at sea. And it's a tradition that goes back to 1861, and it was a wonderful way of timekeeping, especially for the Royal Navy, the merchant fleets and others that were coming in. And a great reminder, of course, to those in the city that actually it really was time for lunch. Well, you can imagine that in these days of elfin safety, that the noise is simply too loud. It's just too much. And there are people that have now complained about the noise of the gun, insisting that this great tradition going back to 1861 stops. But we've been saved. Yes, Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, has saved the institution because we're now going to have quieter ammunition. Is that a surrender to the woke crowd? Well, you know what? Any victory, any maintaining of a great tradition is a good thing. So let's give Grant Shapps 7.5 out of 10 for doing that. Why not? Now, market traders, we all know them as the cheeky chappies, but some people are good at it. Some people clearly are not very good at it. But they're about to have a big national competition. We're going to find out in a moment what makes a good market trader and how are they managing in an age when the banks don't want to take anybody's cash.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable. apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the Princess, and delighted to say joined us now, along with the former head of Royalty Protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the Princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job. And also, I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing. And yet, the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the Princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there was something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now we're going to talk market traders. Oh, yes, we are. And just ahead of the Easter break, East Yorkshire held its first ever Young Traders Market in Beverley as part of the National Market Traders Federation scheme to encourage the under-30s to get started in markets and trade in their local towns. Our reporter, Anna Riley, was out and about in Beverley, East Yorkshire for the event.
Fresh bananas, pick it out.
Markets are the heartbeat of many British towns.
Oh, you fresh veg. 2 puddings for £3, strawberry, seedless, grapes and apple.
But they must attract young people if they are to survive. That's why the National Market Traders Federation are supporting the next generation of market stall holders through their Young Trader of the Year competition.
The average age of market traders is about 55, which as an industry we need more young people. They're coming in. This is the 12th year we're doing this campaign. It is working, but we've got to keep doing this. We've got to keep fresh blood coming in. Young traders bring young shoppers, and it's just great for the industry all around. For little investment can be their own boss, have something they're proud of, and they can expand. I mean, there's loads of businesses out there that started off as market trading, even the likes of Tesco's. So it's little steps. We start at the bottom, work your way up, and you could be the next Alan Sugar.
The first Young Traders Market has been held in East Yorkshire to boost business for entrepreneurs aged between 16 and 30. These stallholders in Beverley appreciate the platform that the event has given them.
Can markets seem a little bit old-fashioned? Yes, but now we've got younger people coming down, we can really develop them and make the high street that little bit more interesting for the youth.
It's a lot better if you have to grind out the hours, work in markets like these, in the rain, in the wind, in the snow.
and I think it gives you more of a love for it.
I think that's what's really good about like young traders and doing markets. It's very supportive. It's not, I mean, it is a competition, but people don't really feel like that. I think it's nice to boost each other.
Most marketplaces are run by councils who have been their public custodians since Victorian times.
But obviously important, particularly for rural areas, to create employment opportunities, and obviously self-employment and starting your own business is a great way to do that. So any way that we can help as a council through our economic development and business support services to encourage younger people to do that and to start their business here in the East Riding is obviously something we'd encourage.
And without the customers, traders, young or old, just wouldn't exist.
Buy my fruit, I like to buy my plants from independent people. I want to see it alive. I want to see people come to Beverley. And OK, online has its place, but if we keep doing online, we shan't have any independent traders. We shan't have this, and that'll be such a sad thing.
The winner of the National Young Traders Market Competition will be announced in August. Anna Riley, GB News.
Well, I'm joined down the line by Joe Harrison, Chief Executive of the National Market Traders Federation. Thank you for joining me on the programme. Joe, I thought with online purchases and massive dominant superstore-style supermarkets, I thought you guys were a dying breed.
Not by any stretch of the imagination, Nigel. We are an up-and-coming breed. Now, markets have been around for a millennium, so the reason they have been is because they adapt to the times they're working in. We know that by running this Young Trader Market campaign, we can introduce people that probably would never have thought of using markets as a way into entrepreneurism, are actually doing so. I mean, we're now in our 12th year, and the whole campaign of establishing local Young Trader markets wherever we can possibly can, and obviously we've built in the competition element of letting them go forward to regional finals and national final. So it's a bit of fun as well as actually a lot more serious about building new businesses for tomorrow.
OK, and, you know, young man, young woman comes into the market trading game. What's the key element? What's that quality they need to really be good at it?
Well, they need to have the hunger and the drive to push themselves forward and promote their businesses. Some of these young people have already established themselves as online businesses, but they've found that by coming into the market, being face-to-face with a customer, they're improving their business greatly, because the best feedback is from your customer, and they can do that in a physical way, face-to-face, and actually improve their business. And even we encourage them to have that online presence and get their stock working 24/7. But at the same time, there's no better way of improving your business as being face-to-face.
Right, it's not one or the other, it's both combined together. I get that point.
It's got to be in this day and age.
Yeah, no, I get that point. Makes sense. Now, one of my campaigns, as you well know, has been about the banks. And indeed, we as a channel put a petition into 11 Downing Street with 300,000 signatures saying don't kill cash. A lot of business done in markets is with cash. Must be very, very difficult in market towns up and down this country to find any banks with branches, and if you do find one, that want to take your money.
Well, it is a great problem, Nigel, to be honest, especially with all the demographic shopping on markets who are used to using cash. But we have improved the systems by having mobile terminals, being able to take the cards. We as an organisation work with a group of companies, making sure that they get the trader gets the best rate. And so they're really getting really competitive rates on using cards and taking cards on the store. So it's a question of embracing the future and their technology, but by no means let's never cut the cash out of the society.
No, absolutely. Joe Harrison, thank you for joining me, and good luck with all you do. I really do mean that. Now, Jacob Rees-Mogg is not back, but you never guess who is standing in for Jacob. It is Anne Widdecombe. Anne, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Did you have a good, restful Easter?
I had an excellent Easter, thank you, yes.
Good. Well, we need to talk about Easter more next year.
Well, we should be talking about Easter in my programme in a minute.
Yeah.
And looking particularly at the churches in Jerusalem at this difficult time, and in the Holy Land in general, and how they're managing in the current conflict.
Yeah, pretty difficult. Well, I have to say, I thought the airbrushing of Easter out of everything in London was just extraordinary.
Well, it's giving in to the woke culture.
It's giving in. We're not giving in. Anne's not giving in. I'm not giving in. You're not giving in. I know that. Well, that's enough from me today. I will be back with you again tomorrow. The weather surprised me over the weekend, so I wonder what Greg Dewhouse has got for us in the days coming up.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. Over the next 24 hours or so, we'll see the heavy showers fade away. It'll often remain quite cloudy, but there will be some brighter spells into Tuesday. Low pressure dominating the weather pattern at the moment, but a slack area of low pressure, so we've had some slow-moving heavy showers. These slowly fading away through this evening time. We do have a frontal system as well across parts of Scotland, the far north of England, giving some spells of rain. Into the early hours, we could see some clear spells through this central swathe of the UK, and here temperatures dipping into low single figures, and some further showers running across southern coastal counties of England too. Just a mixed picture for Tuesday. Some bright sunny spells across this central part of the UK, Wales into the Midlands, for example. This frontal system across eastern parts of Scotland continues to give outbreaks of rain through the day. Into the afternoon, we'll see some showers bubble up for many areas, but there'll be plenty of sunny spells, some rain in the southwest later. Temperatures in the sunshine reaching around 15 or 16 Celsius, still cold under the cloud and rain for Scotland. Into Wednesday, the next area of low pressure moves in, pushing rain north and eastwards across the country. Some of this could be heavy at times. Behind it, some showers following in, but also some brighter skies. And towards the end of the week, it turns wetter and windier, but with winds from the south, temperatures start to rise.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?